Welcome back, folks, to Missiles in the Morning. My name is Andrew.
And my name is Christian.
And today we are here in Miami discussing about the nationwide hot topic of missiles being stationed in Cuba. Here's some context for those who are unaware about Cuba's background. In 1898, after Spain's defeat by Cuban and United States forces, Cuba would gain sovereignty and its own respective government. However, this would be under U.S. supervision. Furthermore, the United States would have conditions tied to Cuba's independence, such as giving it the right to intervene on the island whenever they pleased. However, this amendment will be repealed in 1934 when the United States would sign the Treaty of Relations. It seemed as if the United States and Cuba would cooperate with each other under the rule of Fulgencio Batista throughout the 1950s. However, Fidel Castro would organize guerrilla warfare in the Cuban Revolution to try to overthrow Fulgencio Batista. Therefore, Fidel Castro would start an aggressive relationship between the United States and Cuba, and furthermore, Fidel Castro will begin to rely on USSR aid, and here is where the United States would really decide to intervene. Here is Christian, more on this manner.
Thanks, Andrew. These aggressive relations between the U.S. and Cuba are best exemplified by the Bay of Pigs invasion in April of last year, in which the CIA trained Cuban exiles to invade and overthrow Fidel Castro as the head of the government. Unfortunately, American attempts towards capitalist liberation ended up a failure, and Castro's communist regime maintained control over the country, though the United States does not want to give up so easily, and would subsequently employ Operation Mongoose to the end of clandestinely destabilizing Castro's control over his government. The U.S. pursued these efforts in order to save Cuban subjects from the ravages of a command-state economy, such as food shortages and the sorts. The USSR used this opportunity to increase Cold War tensions by sending nuclear missiles to Cuba under the pretext of protecting an ally. These are dire and scary times, where nuclear bombs are now in range of areas such as this in Miami. Now to Jonah to view the sentiments of those residents of Miami to see how they are holding up in this situation.
Thank you, Christian and Andrew. I'm here live from the streets of Miami, less than 200 miles from where these missiles are located in Cuba. Let's hear from some of the locals and see what they have to say about this whole situation.
Bro, this cruise ship guy is totally out of his mind. I don't know what he's thinking messing with the US of A. I gotta admit, he's kind of harshing on my vibe though. I'm starting to get a little worried.
Khrushchev is going way too far. This is action that cannot be tolerated. It's putting us in danger.
Everyone's talking on politics this and communism that. I'm just scared for my golden doodles, my sweet puppies. I hope this doesn't turn into a war.
Well, folks, you heard it here first. Looks like things are pretty dire down here in Miami. Now back to the studio for a quick message.
During such dire times, it is important that all children are prepared to the proper responses to nuclear attacks. Educate the children. Now back to normal broadcasting.
Welcome back to Missiles in the Morning. With no end in sight for the Cuban Missile Crisis, we turn to our panel to decide whether or not the US or the USSR has handled this crisis better. We have Andrew, Jonah, Christian, and a special guest, Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General of the United States.
Hello, everyone. I'm honored to be here today. We have decided that the U.S. will issue a naval quarantine around Cuba.
With all due respect, sir,
Such a mere response to Soviet transgressions in the island would not solve the issue we have. We tried the same thing with Hitler, with that appeasement, and it would never work. He also grew to power and became an issue for us. We have to directly invade Cuba and remove Soviet influence. Otherwise, the threat of Soviet influence entering the United States...
Hold on, you're making such an ignorant claim. Why would we even risk the possibility of starting a nuclear war?
Wait, hold on.
Let me finish. Why would we even risk the possibility of starting a war with the Soviet Union? Aren't we supposed to avoid direct confrontation with them per the containment policy? Why would we risk provoking an act of aggression?
Wait.
Please just let me finish. I think that diplomacy is the best action in the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is because with diplomacy, we will be able to come to an agreement with the Soviet Union on the issue with ballistic missiles in Cuba. I find it hypocritical that you, as a United States citizen, will want to risk the lives of our own people. I don't believe that Nikita Khrushchev wants to do the same for his people as well. I believe that the best possible scenario to resolve this crisis is through a diplomatic manner. Additionally, the USSR is in the United Nations. What is there to say that they won't come to us in a diplomatic manner? In fact, you are very much of a hypocrite for trying to put us at risk. So,
All right, gentlemen, calm down, all right? I'd like to go back to Robert Kennedy and ask him why the U.S. believes that the naval blockade, or the quarantine rather, would be the best option here.
Thank you. I believe that a naval quarantine around Cuba will help prevent growing tensions between the U.S. and the USSR by allowing us to keep from a direct confrontation with the Soviets. I also believe...
Wait. How would that alleviate tensions? Why are we going to create more conflict between us and the USSR? We have an immense responsibility on our hands. You know by this point that the Soviet Union has nuclear weaponry, and so do we. We need to avoid further conflict because we have such a heavy weight on our shoulders that any further confrontation could mean the entire end of the world. I mean, we're talking about serious nuclear threats here. You understand that, right?
I do recognize what is at stake in this situation. It's major U.S. cities and our investment opportunities in Fidel Castro's rebellious Cuba.
No. This isn't all about us. Like I said, why are you focusing on Cuba? You realize the Cuban people and Castro with his 26th of July movement and all these other things, they were sick of Batista's leadership. They were sick of U.S. imperialism, of us butting our heads in where it doesn't belong. We need to respect their opinions. We need to stay out of Cuba or else it's going to escalate into a huge nuclear war.
Please, sir, allow me to continue.
You guys don't even, you have no idea what you're talking about. You already escalated to this point. There's bombs in Cuba.
Wait. You're saying that we already escalated this crisis. Why would we continue though? Why? You want us to engage.
Guys, no. This is an important point. We need to keep our heads out of Cuba, out of their business, where they belong.
Your house is here in Miami, isn't it? Have you seen what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the nuclear bombs that were dropped there in 1945? You want it to happen here in the U.S.
What does
in
this
Miami?
have to do with World War II?
This is what happens when.
Excuse me.
Where'd it go? Mr. Kennedy, please. This isn't even a real microphone.
You guys are idiots. You guys know that?
I'm sorry, sir.
Now shut up now.